Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to demystify the hidden and honestly pretty chaotic complexities of sudden home water damage. We're mapping out the critical timeline of disaster recovery, looking at exactly what happens to a structure when water gets into places it absolutely shouldn't. Look, if you've ever thought a burst pipe is just a matter of grabbing a few old towels and a mop, prepare to have your perspective totally shifted. Okay, let's dive right in.
So picture this. What actually happens when your home floods? A really common misconception is that water damage is just this static, one-and-done event. But the reality? It's the complete opposite. It's a rapidly compounding crisis. From the exact second a pipe bursts or groundwater breaches your foundation, that water isn't just sitting there. It's actively migrating. It's wicking up your walls like a sponge, soaking deep into your subfloors. Every single passing minute translates directly to structural decay.
And that brings us to, without a doubt, the most crucial number in water mitigation: 48. In a typical climate, specifically, we're talking about the 60 to 70% humidity you'd see in places like Massachusetts, you have exactly 48 hours before dangerous microbial growth, meaning mold, starts to colonize in your drywall, your framing, and your insulation. Once that 48-hour window slams shut, what started as a standard plumbing emergency rapidly devolves into a severe health hazard. The clock is literally always ticking.
Section 1. The Watertown Water Problem.
To really understand how this plays out in the real world, let's look at a fascinating case study, Watertown, Massachusetts. It's basically a perfect microcosm of geographic and architectural vulnerabilities. First off, geography sets a trap here. Watertown sits on this dense New England clay soil, which drains incredibly poorly. So during heavy rain or spring thaws, all that groundwater has nowhere to go. This creates intense hydrostatic pressure. Think of it like an invisible vice grip made of water, just pushing relentlessly against basement foundations. Add in the seasonal runoff from the nearby Charles River, and you've got a recipe for serious groundwater intrusion that can easily overwhelm even the best sump pumps. And this geographic trap gets even trickier when we factor in the architecture. Over in Watertown's East End, you've got these century-old triple-deckers. These properties have shared plumbing risers and really old cast-iron pipes that rupture all the time during harsh winter freeze-thaw cycles. Meanwhile, in the West End, you have these older colonial homes that totally lack the modern vapor barriers needed to keep that hydrostatic pressure out of their finished basements. So the big takeaway here is that no matter where you live, the unique combination of local soil, weather, and historical building practices creates a very specific water risk profile for your home.
Section 2. Remediation versus restoration.
If the absolute worst does happen, you really need to know how to respond. And there's a huge difference between remediation and restoration. It's a major industry misconception, and mixing them up could easily cost unsuspecting homeowners thousands of dollars. People use these terms interchangeably all the time, but they are very distinct phases. Remediation is essentially your emergency triage. It's all about stopping the bleed, aggressively extracting standing water, setting up containment barriers so you don't ruin the dry areas, and getting the initial drawing equipment up and running. Restoration, on the other hand, is the long game. That's the complete process of tearing out ruined drywall, replacing warped floors, repainting, and fully returning the property to its pre-loss condition. Simply put, you absolutely cannot have true restoration without proper remediation first.
Section 3. The three-step recovery process.
So how do the pros actually pull this off without the house just surrendering to mold? Well, it comes down to a highly scientific, systematic approach built on 3 essential steps. Step 1 is emergency water removal. Ideally, you want this initiated within the first 60 minutes. We're talking high-capacity, truck-mounted pumps ripping thousands of gallons of standing water out, right down to the substrate level. Step 2 is controlled structural drying. Now, this isn't just cracking a window open. It's active daily moisture monitoring using advanced thermal cameras. And finally, Step 3 is that complete cosmetic restoration and rebuild we were just talking about.
Now I want to zero in on Step 2, because it relies heavily on psychrometrics. You can totally forget about just throwing a couple of box fans into a wet room. True structural drying is a hardcore applied science. Professionals actually evaluate the exact relationship between room temperature, relative humidity, and the specific saturation levels of your building materials. They use this precise data to calculate what's called grain depression, calibrating commercial dehumidifiers to execute 60 to 80 air changes per hour. It's a highly controlled environment designed to literally pull the moisture out from deep inside your wall cavities. And all of that intense science, it's governed by the ICRC S500. This is the strict, uncompromising industry standard for professional water damage restoration. It maps out the exact extraction protocols, the required moisture mapping with thermal imaging, and all the safety benchmarks. But why should you care about a bunch of industry acronyms? Because insurance companies, especially those operating in Massachusetts, actually mandate adherence to this S500 standard before they'll even think about approving your structural drawing claim. If your contractor isn't certified in this, your insurance company might just look at the bill and flat out deny the payout.
Section 4. The 48-hour mold clock.
Let's bring our focus back to that ticking clock for a second, just to emphasize exactly why this scientific drawing process absolutely cannot be rushed, skipped, or paused. You're dealing with competing windows here. The first 60 minutes, that's your golden window for emergency extraction to stop the water from migrating any further. But hitting that 24 to 48-hour mark enters you into the critical mold colonization window. And here's what's fascinating and honestly pretty terrifying. Even if you extract the standing water immediately, the residual moisture trapped deep inside the materials still takes 3 to 7 full days of thermally monitored psychrometric drying to resolve. You are constantly racing that 48-hour mold clock while being forced to wait out a 7-day drying process just to save your hardwood and plaster. It's a massive, high-stakes balancing act.
Section 5. Costs and insurance claims.
Okay, knowing the science is great, but let's pivot to the financial realities of disaster recovery. Because, let's face it, this is the #1 concern for anyone going through this. Around the Watertown area, a standard water damage restoration job typically runs anywhere between $2,000 and $8,000. But that is a huge range, right? So what actually dictates whether you're paying on the low end or getting hit with the high end? Well, it heavily depends on the square footage affected, the materials involved, and most importantly, the actual type of water that flooded your home.
This massive price range exists because all water is definitely not created equal. There are 3 distinct categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think a burst supply pipe. Extracting this is relatively straightforward and much cheaper. Category 2 is gray water, maybe from a washing machine leak, which does carry some contaminants. But then you have Category 3, black water. This is the nightmare scenario. Sewage backups or ground surface water pushing in from outside. Category 3 requires intense, specialized cleaning. EPA-registered antimicrobials, and usually the complete disposal of porous materials like carpets and drywall, because they just can't be safely sanitized. Naturally, dealing with Category 3 shoots your costs right up to the top of that $8,000 range.
So, the big question, who pays for all this? It all comes down to the golden rule of insurance. Sudden and accidental damage is covered. Gradual, neglected leaks are not. It's really that simple. If a pipe violently bursts in your unheated crawl space on a freezing winter night, your policy is almost certainly going to cover it. But if the wax ring under your toilet has been slowly leaking into your subfloor for 8 months because of neglected maintenance, yeah, your claim is likely going to be met with a swift, hard denial.
Navigating those claims is exactly why having a certified professional matters so much. Good contractors don't just bring in some dehumidifiers and call it a day. They act as your advocate. They provide your insurance adjusters with detailed line item reports using industry-standard software called Xactimate. They provide daily thermal imaging logs and moisture maps as indisputable, hard proof that the drying was necessary and effective. Many will even bill the carrier directly. They do all that heavy lifting with the documentation to make sure your out-of-pocket costs are minimized and your claim sails through without a hitch.
We've covered the hidden science, the local vulnerabilities, the tricky insurance rules, and that relentless 48-hour mold clock. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. If a pipe burst in your home tonight, are you truly ready for the first 60 minutes? Surviving water damage, saving your home, saving your wallet, and protecting your health, it all comes down to acting decisively and scientifically the exact second that clock starts. Thanks for learning with me today on this explainer. Keep this knowledge in your back pocket, because you really never know when you might need it.